Hi kids, it's Unit 1, Week 5 this week, and we're going to be talking a lot more about technology again this week. So this week's essential question is, what are the positive and negative effects of new technology? And I bet if you really think about it, you already know some of the positive things, but I wonder if you've ever thought about some of the negative things that might be going on because of all the technology that we have now. So this week, we're going to talk first about our vocabulary that we're going to be thinking about. The first word that we have is the word access. And in this case, the word access just means that we are going to be getting it from a source, such as from the internet or from someplace else where you'd actually have to get into something. So here's an example. In order to access the locked room, Brad had to punch in a special number code. Our next word is advance. And when you advance, you move forward or make progress on something. So in this case, we have a picture of people advancing the idea of voting or rights for people within our government. Our next word is analysis. Analysis. And analysis means that we're going to give careful examination or study to something. And an example of this might be that this girl is using an analysis to study the shell that she's looking at. Our next word is cite. Cite. And when you cite something, you mention it as proof or evidence in your work or in your conversation. Sometimes we cite evidence from text when you answer a question on a test even. So here's an example. When doing research, it is important to identify and cite sources of information. Our next word is counterpoint. I like this one. It means that it's an opposing or disagreeing point of view. And I suspect that some of you have used a counterpoint when you've had discussions with your parents, maybe even. So here's an example. The positive review from one critic was in counterpoint to another's bad review of the movie. Our next word is data or data. Some of you say it that way. Either way is okay. And data is just facts, figures, and other kinds of information. And our example here is the students gathered data for their experiment by measuring a bubble's size. Our next word is drawback. This is a great picture. Drawback are problems or disadvantages. So if we look at this picture, probably what we know is that limited room in this car for passengers and little trunk space are drawbacks of a small car. Our last word is reasoning. Reasoning. And reasoning is having the ability to think in a logical way. To think in a logical way. So our example here is James used his reasoning skills before deciding on his next chess move. So this week our grammar focus is going to be on avoiding run-on sentences and also just kind of reviewing what sentences really are. So this is going to be a big focus for some of us. So first of all, let's review what types of sentences there are that we typically use in English. There's 4 major types of sentences. Each one of them, though, does begin with a capital letter and does end with an end mark. Now you notice it says end mark, but we've also called that punctuation. Okay? So a declarative sentence makes a statement. It ends with a period. And our example here is we watched the meteor shower, period. It's a statement. Next one is interrogative sentence. Interrogative it ends with a question mark. I like to remember this one because when people get questioned at the police office, they interrogate them and they have the same root word. Okay? So our example sentence is, how long will it last? And it does end with a question mark. The next one, which is kind of hard, it's imperative sentence. And it tells or asks someone to do something. And usually it ends with a period. Occasionally it will end with an exclamation point. It will not end with a question mark. So here we have, look in the northern sky. And what that's telling you to do is, hey, take a look up there. The last sentence type is exclamatory, and it shows strong feelings. It ends almost always with an exclamation point or an exclamation mark. So our example is, that was the brightest one yet. Probably about the meteors. So those are our 4 types of sentences. Okay, now to review even further, and this kind of has to go along with what we talked about last week with the independent and dependent clauses. So sometimes a dependent clause can also be a sort of a sentence fragment. So a sentence, though, is the group of words that expresses a complete thought, has a subject and a predicate. A sentence fragment is a group of words that does not express a complete thought. So if we take a look at these 3 examples, the first one, my father builds a house. That is a complete sentence because we have subject father, and what does your father do? Builds a house. The plans for the house. Well, this has the subject, plans, but we don't know what they're doing, so it needs a predicate. Changes his mind. This one, well, you almost might want to think that his is the subject, but it's not. This is what is happening, but we don't know what is changing his mind. Is it the fact that he doesn't like pizza and so now he's changing his mind about lunch? We don't know. So that's why we need a subject. Okay? So let's take a look at these last 4 down here. You do not need to write them. We're just going to kind of go over them. The first one says, my father looked at the house plans. You should be able to see that that does have a subject and a predicate. What did he do? He looked at the house plans. The second one, the front windows. You do have a subject, which is the windows, but you don't have a predicate, so it's a fragment. Added a staircase. This is also a fragment because we don't know who or what added a staircase. Our 4th sentence or example is, we decided to paint it blue. We do have a complete sentence here because we have the subject as we, and what did we decide to do? To paint it blue. So we do have a predicate. Hope that helps you understand that a little bit better. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about run-on sentences. Now, this is one thing that 5th graders have a lot of trouble with still. And so this is our year to start getting better at it so that we don't have to worry about people not understanding what we're writing about or talking about even. But a run-on sentence just contains 2 or more independent clauses without proper conjunctions or punctuation. So it says, the bell rang, it startled me. I jumped out of my seat. So you can correct this, though, simply by doing one of these strategies to help connect clauses. Because we all know that when the bell rang in this room for the fire alarm not long ago, a lot of people jumped because it startled them, okay? So you could do a couple of things. You could, first, break the independent clauses into separate sentences. That means you're going to put some punctuation in there. The bell rang. Period. It startled me. Period. I jumped out of my seat. That works, especially if you're wanting to maybe add some extra emphasis to what happened in that little moment in time. You could also create a compound subject or compound predicate, and that's what we've been working on with some of the conjunctions. The bell rang and it startled me. There's a conjunction. I jumped out of my seat. So they kind of made a little combination of both. They used their conjunction and they made a new sentence. You could also create a compound sentence using coordinating conjunctions. Now this we really haven't talked too much about, but it works almost the same way. The bell rang, it startled me, and put your comma, and I jumped out of my seat. So there they combined the two predicates really. Then our last opportunity here is to create a complex sentence using subordinating conjunctions. This is definitely what we talked about last week. When the bell rang and startled me, I jumped out of my seat. So here we use that conjunction for the bell doing what? It rang and startled me. And the rest of the sentence being I jumped out of my seat to make it complex. Okay? All right, that's it for today. Make sure if you have questions over something, you can come back to this video and review it. But be careful as you're doing your writings today, because now we're going to start looking for these things. And we want to sound like we're learning something, and we know that we are learning stuff. So it's good for you to be able to review this if you need to. You can stop the video now.